Solutions Review is on location at Boomi World in Las Vegas. Brought to you by Dell Boomi.
We are here at Boomi World 2018 in Las Vegas, and I'm Doug Atkinson, and happily joined by the Deputy CIO at the University of Technology in Sydney.
That's great, well done.
Didn't think I was going to be able to get that done. But it's actually great to have you here, because that's a great role and very appropriate for us to have a conversation, because you're a customer, and obviously you're teaching technology as well. But I'm curious about that. So when did you become a customer of Dell Boomi?
Yeah, so we've been a customer for about 20 months now, I think. And I guess it started back in 2016. We kind of took a step back as an IT team in the university. So we have about 30,000 students, so it's quite a large university, and it's very ambitious. And trying to achieve lots of different things. We have a big research part of the university. We obviously teach, and we also run a corporate business as well. So there's a lot of things happening, and really the way IT was structured, our application architecture, everything else, we felt wasn't going to cut it. I mean, things were moving too fast, we couldn't keep up with it. So we took a step back and took a few people off site, and we painted a picture of what we thought the application landscape for us needed to look like. And we drew up a strategy which we called Application 2020. So we built a picture of what we thought, ideally in 2020, this is what it needs to look like.
So you had a 4-year plan, effectively?
Yeah, it's a bit scary that 2020 is getting closer. So
You're halfway home.
Yeah. And you know, when we built out that future state vision, I suppose, we then thought about and talked about some of the constraints. And one of those was integration. So we had, you know, over many years, like a lot of reasonably large organizations like us, we had gone down the SOA and ESB route. A lot of investment over quite a lot of time, a lot of resources, and it still wasn't where we wanted it to be. So we saw that as a constraint, I guess, and especially our new application strategy was very cloud focused. And how we did integration back then, it also wasn't going to cut it. So we actually, back in 2016, did quite a bit of research. We engaged Gartner. We went to some conferences, we talked to lots of the vendors. At that time, I mean, it's still a bit of an immature space, I think, in terms of the landscape's changing a lot, but back then it was even more immature.
Yep.
We met with Boomi and with some of the other players in this space. And I guess we got a good feeling that this type of iPaaS technology was you know, that was part of our future picture. So we took confidence from that, and we went to market. So we went through a formal RFP process, quite a lengthy process actually, including our incumbent supplier.
So I'm curious about that, and I know our audience is curious about that. So talk a little bit about that process. So how long did you did an RFP, how long did you kind of go through that review?
Look, the very first thing we did actually was to run a proof of concept. So we did a very light procurement process up front, and we said, right, you 4 or 5 kind of, you know, best placed players.
And was that it? You chose 4 or 5 to?
We discussed it with 4 or 5, and we chose one. Just to run a proof of concept.
And was it Dell Boomi?
And it was in the end. And that was just to give us, again, that next bit of confidence that it could do what we needed, just because this type of technology, again, was quite new, and for us as well. So we wanted to make sure if we got the software, plugged it into our environment, that we could connect it to our student system and our finance system, and it would work. Okay. So once we got that level of confidence, then we formalized it all, and we wrote up our requirements and the capabilities that we thought we needed from such a platform, and we went out through a very formal process.
But was the ball game over at that point?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. And you know, and I've said this to the Boomi team. Obviously, we selected Boomi. I'm here at Boomi World, but you know.
Well, and other salespeople would love to know whether or not they were in the game still after
and you know what?
that.
It was very close. And I've said this to the Boomi team. From a product perspective, there was almost 2 or 3 platforms that could do most of what we needed. To be honest, they have different approaches, and there's pros and cons, right? The 2 main reasons we went with Boomi in the end, one was I guess we kind of could have went either way with the complexity of some of the other offerings or the simplicity of Boomi. And again, sometimes there's pros and cons of this. We veered towards the simplicity. We saw more value in that. But also the Boomi team, actually, that we had worked with through that process, really gave us a lot of confidence that we could partner with them. I mean, when at this stage, we're doing there's a lot of transformational change with technology at UTS at the moment, and we need to be partnering with suppliers. I mean, we're not just buying software. We need to develop a long-term partnership. And we ended up going into a reasonably long-term deal with Boomi and that's to give both sides a bit of assurance that we're going to do this together, right? This is not a 12-month, you're not going to stand this up and then we'll say goodbye, right? This is, integration for us is really core. I mean, it's obviously what hangs all of our applications together. So I guess the feeling we got from the Boomi team in terms of their capability and their cultural fit and everything else and how they would work with our internal teams, probably tipped the scales at the end of the day, actually.
So I'm curious about advice that you would provide folks who are going to go down a similar path in terms of making a purchase like that. What would you do differently? What would you say you did well in that cycle of selection?
I think doing a proof of concept was a good step because I think it allowed us to get our hands on a product and just make sure that it did, these type of solutions can do what we think they can. What I would do, so I think largely looking back, I think we did quite a few things right. One of the challenges actually is it's a big cultural change for the technical people that we have actually, and moving to this type of platform. It is less code, okay, and with that comes a rethinking of how you go about solving some problems. And I think if you try and use the old mindset and use the new tool, then you're going to get very frustrated. So I think, in hindsight, probably a little bit more focus on that from us. And we're still that's still a process we're going through now, actually.
That's interesting. So, well, that was ultimately the one question I really was curious about was what advice what you would provide to folks as they think about it.
Yeah.
And I guess it's thinking about not only how to make a great decision, but how it can have an impact, politically, culturally, internally on folks that may feel not necessarily threatened, or maybe slightly threatened, or
and very attached to the other technology.
Exactly.
But look, my other piece of advice would be to be brave. Actually, I think this is a new world and things are moving quickly. And if we had stayed where we were on the existing technology platform and the existing way of working, I don't think we would be where we are today, and we certainly wouldn't be where we need to be in 2 years' time. And I think we can do that now with Boomi.
Well, and I think that's a really good piece of advice, because in the end, I think you would be considered an early adopter at this point, because a lot of people haven't been able to cross over to that level of bravery.
I think we would be considered an early adopter, especially at that enterprise level, probably, because I guess Boomi historically have lots of smaller customers, and that's just how they evolved, I suppose, over time. And we looked at the platform as an enterprise-grade integration platform, and also give us the API capability that we needed, and with a view to not using anything else. And in large organizations, that's challenging, and it's still challenging for Boomi, right? We push it, and it's still a journey we're on. But I'm confident that it's the right platform for us. But we are at such a scale, and there's a lot of complexity. Some of it due to politics and everything else that you get in a large organization, right? And many years of legacy. And some of our applications have been in place for many years. And one of the things I would say in our industry, in higher education, there's a lot of niche type applications. So everything's not Workday or Salesforce, and Boomi will have connectors for it. It's just not the world that we live in. Sometimes we have these small applications that are from a very small software consultancy, and we got to run that. It's one of our enterprise systems, and we need to integrate to it.
Right.
So it is a complex landscape.
Sure. Outstanding. Well, thanks very much for swinging by. We appreciate it. It's always good to hear from somebody who's just gone through the buying cycle and can share their experiences. So we appreciate the time.
Thank you, Doug.
All righty.